Good evening and welcome back to Owl After Dark. Now, wherever you are, in the quiet hush of your bedroom, tucked beneath a warm blanket, or simply looking for a moment of stillness, this story is for you. So before you get relaxed, take a moment to like and subscribe if you enjoy our videos, and let us know where you are listening from in the comments below. Now let's get back to our story. Tonight, we will journey into the gentle rhythm of a world often overlooked. A world carried on a coiled shell, low to the earth, quiet and unhurried, the life of a snail. This is not a tale of speed, of drama, or of conquest. It is a story of moisture and moss, of dewdrops on bark and the slow ballet of twilight creatures, of silent exploration and patient resilience. Imagine yourself shrinking down to the size of a coin. Your pace no faster than the hour hand of a clock. You carry your home upon your back, each step deliberate, every moment softened by the damp embrace of soil and shade. As we drift gently through this story, you'll learn about the rhythms of the snail's day, their hidden mysteries, and even their rare encounters with others of their kind. No need to stay awake for it all. Let your mind follow at its own pace. Let us begin. Let us begin not with the snail itself, but with its stage, a quiet patch of earth, damp, still, the kind of place you might step over without a second thought unless you're barefoot, in which case you'd remember. There, nestled in the shade of a broad hosta leaf, lies our subject, not basking, not bounding, just being. Its body is soft, impossibly soft, and shimmering faintly like a well-buttered noodle. At the front, four delicate tentacles probe the air. Two long ones rise and sway like slow-motion periscopes, eyes at their tips. The other two, shorter, more purposeful, inspect the ground with the diligence of a tiny customs officer. It's a world built for detail, and the snail is very detail-oriented. Not by choice. Its eyesight is so limited it likely couldn't spot a truck until it bumped into one, but by necessity, touch, taste, and smell guide every decision, and with no deadlines to meet, it takes its time to consider everything. The morning begins, though morning for a snail isn't about sunrise, it's about moisture, and this particular morning is perfect. The soil is damp, the leaves above drip softly from the night's condensation, and the air smells of decaying wood and last week's rainfall. Perfect. The snail emerges from wherever it hunkered down, perhaps beneath a flat stone, perhaps in the curled leaf of a lettuce plant someone forgot to harvest. It happens. Snails appreciate your gardening mistakes more than you know. The first act of the day, moving. It begins the way all good journeys do, with slime. A silvery trail unfurls behind it as it glides forward, the mucus acting both as lubrication and a kind of mobile red carpet, only stickier and significantly less glamorous. This trail serves many purposes: movement, moisture retention, and later, in certain romantic contexts, a sort of perfumed letter of interest. But we'll get to that. Now the snail explores. To you or me, it might look like nothing more than the corner of a garden bed. To the snail, it's vast, overwhelming. Imagine walking through a jungle made entirely of broccoli and roof tiles, and you'll begin to understand. A single clover leaf could take an hour to navigate, and that's assuming no distractions, which in the snail's world include such thrilling events as a particularly soft patch of moss, an unexpected puddle, or best of all, a fallen petal from a flower it will never understand but greatly enjoy licking. Eating, for the snail, is less about meals and more about gentle commitment. They don't chew so much as file down their food. A radula, imagine a microscopic cheese grater on a tongue, scrapes, rasps, and rubs against leaves, mold, and algae. There is no chomping, just a soft whispering scrape, the kind of sound you might mistake for wind, or a very quiet toothbrush. A single dandelion leaf can be a three-course affair, bit by bit, scraped down into digestible pulp, swallowed without ceremony. It's not glamorous, but it's thorough, and somehow oddly dignified. As the sun climbs higher and the ground begins to warm, the snail pauses. It senses the change, not through a thermometer, but through the subtle language of humidity. Its body starts to dry just a little too quickly. The air feels too sharp. This is danger, not dramatic danger. No thundering hooves or firestorms, just dryness. And so it retreats, not in fear, not in panic, but with slow precision, beneath a shaded log or into the underside of a large stone. Or for the ambitious ones, buried just slightly beneath the top layer of moist soil, like a forgotten truffle wrapped in slime. Some snails, ever the engineers, will seal themselves in with a thin, translucent membrane. The epiphragm, part door, part saran wrap, part temporary, do not disturb sign. Once in place, the snail rests. Time passes. Beetles patrol above. Ants march in organized lines. The snail dreams, if snails dream, of lettuce leaves and cooler nights. As dusk returns, so too does the snail, emerging slowly, blinking in its own way, not with eyelids, but with awareness. Twilight is a blessing, cool, damp, and gently lit. The perfect time for travel, for feeding, for contemplation. The world is quieter now, and the snail is ready. It glides over the trail it left that morning, perhaps recognizing the faint scent it deposited. Snails can, in fact, follow their own slime back to places of interest, which is incredibly efficient if a little grows, and through it all that coiled shell remains, spiraled, ancient in design, a perfect example of portable housing, complete with natural camouflage and zero property taxes. It grows with the snail, layer upon layer, each ring recording not just age, but circumstance, dry seasons, wet years, long naps, strange adventures. Inside, the snail lives entirely. It is never without home. It carries it gently everywhere it goes. And so the day ends, not with a sunset viewed from a mountaintop or a final burst of action, but with a slow return to stillness, a cool corner beneath a leaf, a shell tilted just so, a final ribbon of slime laid down like a bookmark for tomorrow. The world above continues, birdsong fades, night insects stir, but the snail simply rests, its life, like its movement, unhurried, deliberate, and quietly extraordinary. From this gentle rhythm of a single snail's day, we'll now journey, even deeper, into the past, to ancient spirals trapped in stone and forgotten trails pressed into prehistoric soil, to the world of snail fossils, lost species, and the slow passage of time. If you're still awake, stay with us. If you're not, that's just fine. There is something quietly profound about the fact that snails have been gliding their slow glistening way across this earth for over 500 million years. Let that linger a moment. 500 million years before the dinosaurs, before flowers, before insects thought of wings, there were snails, shells spiraling gently in shallow seas, small creatures inching across a world still figuring out what life even was. If Earth were a novel, snails would appear in the prologue, page 1, possibly even the preface. And while they haven't changed much, they've added a few flourishes, tried out different shell shapes, some even went back to the sea and gave up the land entirely. One thing has remained constant, that beautiful, hypnotic spiral. Fossils of ancient gastropods are found in every corner of the world, locked in limestone, curled into marble. Impressions left in sandstone like tiny forgotten signatures, some of them so perfectly preserved they seem to be resting, not extinct, just sleeping patiently. Imagine yourself now, if you will, in a sun-warmed desert canyon. The rock walls around you are layers of time, ancient seabeds lifted high by shifting tectonic plates. You reach out and your fingers brush over the shell of a snail that died before birds existed. Smooth, spiraled, familiar. There's something comforting about that this tiny slow creature survived extinction after extinction, quietly coiling its story through catastrophe and calm alike, never rushing, never needing to. Even in ancient human history, the snail leaves its mark. Stone Age middens, ancient garbage piles essentially, contain heaps of snail shells, cracked and scorched. Early humans may not have moved slowly, but they did move hungrily, and snails, conveniently, do not run away. Some historians believe that in certain early settlements, snails were intentionally collected and kept in shaded pits, an early form of farming. Call it snail husbandry, a phrase that no one has ever put on a business card, but perhaps should. Imagine an ancient person squatting beside a cool, mossy pit filled with slow-moving mollusks, gently humming a tune as they drop in a fresh lettuce leaf, a tender kind of agriculture, one you don't have to chase. In other cultures, the snail found its way into symbolism. Its spiral, mimicked in carvings, was seen as a reflection of the cosmos, the inward turning loop, an echo of galaxies, a symbol of rebirth, of cyclical time, of patience. In medieval manuscripts, monks sometimes doodled snails into the margins, little spiraled creatures facing off against knights and beasts in tiny bizarre battles. Some think it was a joke, others think it was a metaphor. Perhaps even then people understood that the real battle was against time, and that the snail, despite appearances, always wins that fight by never truly rushing toward the end. Of course, not all snails survived the ages. There were giants once, massive land snails the size of melons, and tiny ones too, no larger than the period at the end of this sentence. Some snails evolved into coiled marvels that lived in coral reefs and vanished with the seas. Others developed elaborate armor, or bizarre, spiky shells that looked more like abstract art than biology. Nature, it seems, has always had a playful side, and the snail was one of its favorite canvases. Even today, new species are discovered in forgotten corners of cloud forests and limestone caves, their lives unnoticed, their trails unseen, until someone, usually with a very large magnifying glass and a very quiet disposition, finds them. And then there are the mysteries. In a remote mountain valley in Asia, a cave painting over 9,000 years old shows a spiral beside a stick figure. Is it a snail? A sun? A symbol for something else entirely? We'll never know. And the snail, true to form, isn't offering explanations. In ancient Greek pottery, spirals abound, sometimes thought to represent waves or snakes, but some scholars whisper theories. that the artist may have been inspired by the familiar coiled shells along the olive groves and vineyards, and who are we to say they weren't? Through all these traces, all these echoes in stone and paint and shell, the snail leaves us a message, not a loud one, not an urgent one, but a simple one. I was here, I am still here. I move slowly, but I endure. So now, as the stars begin to emerge in our story sky, we gently close this chapter of ancient spirals and fossil memories. The world has changed again and again, and still the snail continues. From the prehistoric to the present, it has never been fast, but it has always been, and next we'll return to the present. To contrast the humble daily snail with another kind, the elite, the dramatic, the unusual, snails that break the mold, that glimmer, that behave in ways most snails would consider terribly improper, because even in the world of snails there is gossip. Let us drift now right from the humble garden patch and the fossil bed to somewhere a little more polished, a little more extravagant, a little weirder. Because while most snails live lives of quiet repetition, gliding, grazing, hiding, resting, there are some who do things differently. Not faster, no snail ever wins a foot race, but grander, odder, flashier, like the celebrities of a snail world, eccentric, extravagant, and gloriously unaware of how strange they are. We begin, as all lavish things should, in France. Now, not the cobbled streets of Paris or the flickering light of the Eiffel Tower. No, we're going rural, to the hills, the vineyards, the countryside, because tucked among grapevines and hedgerows lies a very particular kind of snail, Helix pomatia, known affectionately as the Burgundy snail, and even more famously as escargot. Yes, this snail is not just a creature, it is cuisine, a delicacy, a dinner guest that doesn't leave, but long before it arrives at any plate, it lives a rather regal life. Unlike its smaller, scrappier cousins, Helix pomatia is quite large, robust, its shell a grand creamy swirl the size of a small coin, its movements almost philosophical. If it had thoughts, they might be something like, yes, I could eat that lettuce, but why not pause and consider the lettuce first? It prefers clean environments, moist soils, a good bit of calcium in the ground to keep its shell pristine. Think of it as the spa resort version of snail living. Less back alley compost bin, more private herb garden behind a villa. And when the weather turns cold, it does something rather dignified. It hibernates, not in a panic, not buried in a pile of damp leaves like the rest. Number this snail digs down, slowly, until it finds just the right spot. Then it pulls into its shell, seals the entrance, and settles in for months. It becomes essentially a very elegant rock, a rock with dreams of spring and parsley. And what of romance, you might ask? Well, snails are hermaphrodites. Each one contains both male and female reproductive organs. So when two snails fall in love, or at least stumble into compatible slime, they both emerge pregnant. It's an impressively egalitarian approach to reproduction. But not all snails are content with this simple system. Some go dramatic. Consider, if you will, the love dart. Yes, that is a real thing. Certain snails during courtship will produce a small, calcified spear, a literal dart, which they drive into their partner's body in an effort to improve their own reproductive success. Now, before you gasp too loudly, it's not deadly, just mildly intrusive, like being poked by a very small, determined toothpick wielded by someone you're kind of into. Biologists believe this dart delivers hormones that improve sperm retention, which in snail terms is quite romantic. Imagine, if you will, that Valentine's Day came with flowers, chocolates, in a ceremonial javelin throw. Snails are nothing if not surprising. Now, let's turn our gaze from France to the tropics, to the rainforest, to color. Because not all snails are brown, beige, or subtly stylish. Some snails are outrageously beautiful. Lycus virgineus, for example, the Cuban painted snail. Its shell spirals in bright glossy stripes, pink, green, white, purple, like a living piece of candy. It looks less like an animal and more like something you'd buy in a gift shop next to tropical postcards and handmade earrings. These snails live high up in trees, not typical snail territory, but they cling, glide, and nibble their way along branches and trunks, tracing colorful paths along the bark. The locals sometimes collect the shells after the snails have passed, not for food, but for jewelry, for art, and who could blame them? These snails wear their homes like fashion statements, like high couture. Mossy jungle runway ready. Then there's the sea. Yes, many snails never left the ocean. They stayed behind when others crawled onto land, choosing instead a life of coral reefs and tide pools. These are the marine gastropods, cone snails, cowries, and the famed abalone, whose inner shell gleams with iridescent blues and greens like moonlight trapped in stone. Some of these ocean snails are venomous, surprisingly so. The cone snail, for example, wields a harpoon-like tooth it can fire to paralyze fish, which sounds terribly aggressive for something shaped like a pasta shell. Of course, the cone snail doesn't mean to be frightening. It just has standards, a certain culinary ambition. Still, in the interests of calm in bedtime storytelling, we'll leave the venomous ones to the scuba divers and oceanographers. And so, as we drift among these more unusual snails, the painted, the pampered, the peculiar, we are reminded of a quiet truth. Even within a slow world, there is variety, expression, flamboyance. Not every snail is content with the underside of a log. Some dream of jungle bark. Some prefer garden gates. Some would very much like to be eaten, but only in garlic butter and only by someone with good manners. Even the slowest lives have wild outliers. So as we curl now toward our final segment, let the shells spiral in your mind. From garden to jungle, fossil to fashion icon, each snail living its own quiet epic. And in the next part of our journey, we'll turn gently toward endings. The end of days, of seasons, of lives, and how snails quietly, resiliently face hardship, winter, predation, and time with neither complaint nor fear. It will not be grim, but it will be honest. And from that honesty, peace. Now we ease into the final arc of our journey, hardships, death, and resilience. Though the theme may sound weighty, we remain slow, steady, and calm, because in the life of a snail, even hardship arrives on quiet feet. Here, we explore adversity through a lens of softness, how snails endure change, loss, winter, predators, and time, and how, in their slow and subtle way, they persist. The world, as the snail knows it, is not always kind and not always cruel. It simply is. There are no great cries of sorrow when a snail goes missing beneath a boot or disappears during a dry season. No public ceremonies, no mourning doves. But if you listen, if you slow down, you might see it in the silence, in the patterns left behind, in the small, perfect shell, now empty, resting in the shade of a fallen leaf. Even the smallest lives leave shadows, and even in endings, there is grace. Let's begin, gently, with the seasons. Snails are not built for frost. Their soft, unprotected bodies, delicate and damp, cannot endure freezing temperatures. And so, as the warm winds shift to cold, the snail must decide not where to go, but how to go. Many burrow down into the soil, into the roots. They retreat into their shell, seal it tight with a layer of dried mucus, called an epiphragm, and grow still, very still. This is not just rest, it is hibernation. The body slows, the heart flutters softly. They become a thought in pause, waiting for the page to turn, and some do not wake. Whether the winter was too long, or the shelter too shallow, or the frost too deep, some shells remain sealed long after the spring arrives. And yet, even in that stillness, they serve a purpose. Their shells become homes for beetles, shelters for ants, calcium for the soil. Nothing is wasted. Even in death, the snail continues to give. There are, of course, predators, birds, beetles, mammals with sharp teeth and quicker reflexes. Some predators crack the shell, others carry it away. Some, with very little ceremony, simply slurp the snail whole, like an oyster. To be a snail is to know vulnerability, to know that you cannot outrun fate, that your only defenses are your shell and your silence. But this too is part of life. In a damp woodland after a storm, a song thrush finds a rug. It uses it like a table, smashing snail shells against it with practiced rhythm. To the thrush, it is dinner. To the forest, it is rhythm, a pattern that has existed for thousands of years. Even the rock remembers its surface chipped and smoothed by generations of quiet endings. And there are greater challenges, things without teeth or beaks. There is drought, long days of heat, with no dew, no rain, no shade. Snails respond in the only way they can. They wait. Sealed into their shells, they enter a state called estivation, similar to hibernation, but against heat instead of cold. They dry out, shrink back, close the door and breathe once every few hours, if that. Imagine living like that. No water, no food, just waiting for the first drop of rain to return. When it finally does, when the soil darkens and the first splatter hits the shell, they wake, slowly, gently. They emerge not with joy, but with acceptance. Back to grazing, back to gliding, back to life, exactly as it was. But perhaps the most mysterious hardship of all is time. Snails do not live forever. Most land snails in the wild live just 2 to 7 years, some longer, some less, but rarely beyond a decade. And they do not know this. They do not count days. They do not dread what comes. They simply go on. They lay eggs in soft, damp places, small, translucent orbs, often hidden beneath moss or mulch. They never meet their children, never teach them. And yet the pattern continues, generation after generation. The rhythm never broken. A trail through time, thin, fragile, unwavering. Even when snails lose their shells, through damage, accident, or force, they do not always die. Some recover, their bodies seal the wound. The calcium finds its way. The scar becomes part of the story, a spiral interrupted, but still turning. Others are not so lucky. Their soft bodies too exposed, their injuries too great. They retreat, grow still, and vanish. But again there is no panic, no chaos, no flailing, just stillness, like a candle slowly fading, like mist retreating in morning light. In a quiet forest after rain, you might find a dozen snails on a single fallen log, some alive, some not, but all at peace. There is something noble in that, to live slowly, to endure quietly, to accept what is given and what is taken away. The snail does not fear the end, it simply continues until it doesn't, and in doing so, it teaches us something, not loudly, not directly, but in its own spiraled language. That there is strength in softness, that stillness is not the absence of life, but part of its rhythm, that to move slowly is not to move weakly, it is to move with purpose. And now we find ourselves at the edge of this long, gentle path, a trail we follow together, slowly, patiently, at the rhythm of a snail. Not all stories end with a flourish, some don't end at all, they simply fold into quiet, just like the snail's spiral shell. Our journey curves back toward its beginning, not in haste, not in drama, but in stillness, and in that stillness we understand. Some of the most enduring lives are the quietest ones. You've walked with snails tonight, you've grazed with them by starlight, waited under leaves for the rain to pass, and curled into safety when the world grew too loud or too dry. You've wandered not just across gardens and forest paths, but through time itself, ancient oceans, fossil beds, forgotten ruins where shells told stories longer than language. You've seen snails dressed in silk, snails bathed in moonlight, snails who rule their mossy kingdoms with neither voice nor crown, and you've felt perhaps the softness of their strength, not a loud strength, not the kind that conquers or shouts, but the kind that endures, that keeps going, that glides forward even when no one watches. There is something deeply comforting about that kind of life, a life that does not demand attention, but it deserves it, a life that does not rush, that does not compete, that simply is. And as you lie here now, eyes heavy, limbs relaxed, thoughts quieter than they were an hour ago, you might notice there's a snail-like peace within you too, that small part of you that yearns not to do more, but to do less, not to strive, but to settle, not to conquer the world tonight, but simply to rest in it. So imagine, one more time, you are no larger than a thimble, your body cool and soft, wrapped in a perfect spiral shell, strong but never rigid. You glide slowly beneath a fern, the world is thick with sand, damp earth, distant blossoms, the fading trace of rain. You're not late, you're not behind, you're where you are, and that is enough. A mossy stone rises ahead of you. You climb it, not because you must, but because it is there. And when you reach the top, you pause, you feel the air, you wait, because in a snail's world, there is time for stillness. There is time to pause, to be, to simply feel the moment pass through you like a breeze without needing to chase it. And now perhaps you begin to feel something you haven't felt in a while. Stillness, not the anxious stillness that begs to be filled with noise, but the deep, rich kind, the stillness of earth before dawn, the hush of trees at midnight, the silence that only comes when the mind is ready to rest. Let that stillness hold you, let it soften the edges of your thoughts. Let your breath slow until it matches the rhythm of the world outside your window, the rhythm of the snail, the rhythm of the night. There is nothing left to do, nothing left to figure out. Not now. Now there is only this, the softness of your bed beneath you, the warmth gathering in your chest, and the faint distant memory of snails gliding silently through damp leaves. They are out there still, tiny unbothered travelers, leaving glistening trails behind them as they search for the next patch of moss, the next dewdrop, the next quiet place to rest. They do not know where they are going, but they are not lost, and neither are you. The path will continue, and when it is time, you'll wake. You'll move forward, softly, calmly, one moment at a time. But for now, pull into your shell, close the door gently behind you, and rest. The world can wait. You've grazed enough. You've wandered far. And like the snail tucked under a fallen leaf, you deserve peace. Not because you earned it, but because peace is not a price, it is a place, and you're already there. So sleep now. Let the spirals spin slowly in your dreams. Let the garden grow quiet around you, and let the night take hold, not with force, but like a blanket of cool air, a hush of soil, a breath in the dark. We will meet again some other night on some other soft trail. But for now, sleep. Sleep as the snail sleeps, not worrying about the morning, not rushing toward the future, but simply being here, still, silent, safe.